Welcome to a podcast celebrating Scottish culture and entertainment, which is here to sing the praises of books, films, comedy, music, theatre, exhibitions, telly, poetry and all that jazz. I'm Nicola Meehan. I'm an arts writer and broadcaster, and I'll give you the lowdown on what's coming up, what's happening now, what came before and what we love, which is to say that every week I'm here to give you a kick up the arts. Now, just before we get wired into this episode, a quick reminder that I'll be in conversation with the brilliant writer David Keenan, whose hallucinogenic books include Xstabeth and This Is Memorial Device. And we're going to be chatting about his new collection of music writing, Volcanic Tongue. That's in Edinburgh later this month. It raves about and roves across artists like the Pastels, Nick Cave and John Martin. And we're going to chat about all of that for a Kick Up the Arts live from the Portobello Bookshop on March the 27th. There'll be loads of tunes as well, and we would love you to join us. Right now, though, we're in Glasgow for the terrific exhibition Digging in Another Time, Derek Jarman's Modern Nature. Jarman was a visionary English filmmaker, writer, artist and gay rights activist, and it's inspired by his diary entries of the same name, which detail his 1989 performance installation at Glasgow's Third Eye Centre, which is now the CCA, replete with two men in a bed, caged in by barbed wire. And it also notes his radical, beautiful garden at Prospect Cottage in Dungeness, established in the aftermath of his HIV diagnosis. He died in 1994. Alongside his visceral paintings and photos and audio-visual wonder and walls of homophobic tabloid coverage, the exhibition also features responses from contemporary artists, including a film by Tom Walker that digs into footage of Jarman talking at the Third Eye Centre, alongside thrilling work by Sarah Wood, Luke Fowler, Andrew Black, and a forthcoming live performance from Jade de Montserrat. It's curated by Dominic Patterson, it runs until Sunday the 4th of May, and it is free. You've got to go. There's also a fab-looking programme at the city's GFT over the coming weeks, including screenings of extraordinary Jarman films like The Garden, starring Tilda Swinton, Caravaggio with Robbie Coltrane and Dexter Fletcher, and the stunning Revolutionary Blue, which features a Q&A with Derek Jarman's long-term friend and collaborator Neil Bartlett. I've been to the exhibition 3 times now. I love it. And the last time I was joined by actor Gavin Mitchell, who worked closely with John Byrne, who's a household favourite as Still Game's Bobby the Barman, and who spent time with Derek Jarman in Glasgow in the 1980s. We were also joined by the brilliant Glasgow-based artist and photographer Matthew Arthur Williams. His own response in the exhibition, A House with No Walls, reverberates with life and death of buildings and people and histories and all their connections. It enlivens a line between Derek Jarman and the queer American avant-garde composer Julius Eastman, who worked with Arthur Russell and Meredith Monk, and whose recorded concert from the Third Eye Centre in the 1970s, the only one of its kind, was discovered only recently within the archive. We had a wander round the Hunterian Art Gallery, then we sat down for coffee and a chat at the nearby Kelvin Hall. Matthew's also a DJ, he's got a show on Clydebuilt Radio, so what with him being a man of many talents? That got us talking about pseudonyms. Do you have a DJ alter ego?
Yeah, I hate it now because it's overused. It's called Jungle Hussy.
Hussy.
And it's good because it kind of has a nice ring to it, but it was a joke and then it's just lasted too long. And now it's 10 years.
It got too big.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a pseudonym, Gavin?
Not that I can think of.
Not even Jungle Hussy?
No, I wish I had. I used to be terribly pretentious, sign myself into places as T.J. Newton. The man who felt it.
Well, I'll be looking out for that in the hotel guest books.
If not that, Margaret.
Margaret Docherty.
And Margaret Docherty. I'm delighted that I have all of these various people with us in this lovely room. And it's very lovely. We can kind of see trees and all sorts outside. I feel like we've got a whole different view of Glasgow from this little room in the Kelvin Hall. But we have been at the Hunterian again. We hot-footed it across, Gavin. From this incredible exhibition at which, Matthew, you're one of the artists featured. I went to see it, I think, first of all, maybe just before Christmas, in fact. It's been going for a while. We've got a few months yet to catch it. But the first time I went in, it made me reflect on the fact that I really had to kind of dig deep myself to remember when Derek Jarman had come into my imagination, if you like. And I wondered if that was the same for you. Like, do you remember when you first even became aware of his name, Matthew, or what he did? Because there is so much there.
Mm-hmm. It's so wide as well. Like, I don't know if it would have been somebody going, have you read Modern Nature? Or have you seen... I think it could even be references to Sebastian. And like, and that... And then like, going through the films and then going back to the books and the diaries. And even then, I couldn't really get into the diaries properly when I started, and revisiting it, I've gone back through stuff. And I think when I tried to read them before, I struggled with the pace of it.
Yeah.
But later on, when I went back to it, the pace of it was completely where I needed to be, because my capacity to read had gone out the window after COVID. So I couldn't really read anyway.
Okay.
I couldn't really stick with a book long enough. And the pace of how he writes is perfect to get back into, because you pick it up, you read a couple of months, and then you put it back down, and then...
Of course. That's really interesting. Yeah. And everything, in the same way that his film work is like a painting, or his artwork is like, the way he writes is so visual as well, that you can get so much out of, just maybe a day's worth of entry, which is, and of course that's the way it was written as well.
Yeah.
What about you, Gavin? When did you first? Because I can tell you that for me, I think I first started becoming aware of him as a child of the 80s, of course, and a massive, massive Pet Shop Boys fan. Because of videos, right? Because of It's a Sin, because of Rent, and I would have been at primary school at this point, but I also must have been kind of like reading my big brother's kind of weeklies, Inkies, because I was aware of the fact that he was doing visuals for a Pet Shop Boys tour that I could only imagine. It seemed out of reach, but fascinating.
Yeah, no, incredible. I think it was probably GFT for me, when the old days when you used to pick up brochures and his name just came up all the time. So, and going back to legendary things like Jubilee and stuff like that. So there used to have seasons of Jarman then at GFT.
I think that's it as well. Something like Jubilee alone, when you even see it referenced, it's like they become so much part of our cultural landscape that it's incredible to think that this thing existed. Adamant, toilet rocks up, and what it captured, that total collapse, if you like, of society, but in the name of entertainment, in the name of film.
No, absolutely. And also I just think, so many things that he did cover, from set design to his artwork to writing, he was a real true polymath, but very kind of true to his own vision. He's quite incredible. And then I suppose not until late 80s, which was amazing, that kind of triggered me again going to the exhibition, was 89 I met him, and when he was at the Third Eye Centre, as it was then. And we were doing the National Review of Live Art. Myself and Ray Smith were doing the kind of central part of the Third Eye Centre at the time, exhibition. And Derek was in the room off of that, but I was working at Citizens Theatre at the time, and Derek was using the paint frame. So I used to see him at lunchtime. We went out a few times together and stuff like that. And so at that point he was using, it was like old camp beds he'd got down Paddy's Market and the Barras and stuff like that, and using Action Men figures, and lots of headlines from Red Tops. You can guess the one. Let's not even give them air. And covering it with tar. Bitumen tar, these action figures, and kind of questioning masculinity and stuff. But the amazing thing I thought seeing the exhibition today was, you forget, I mean it's relatively recent, but you forget just what an extraordinary time it was actually. With Clause 28 and what he was challenging, and what he was such an activist about, and so outspoken about, including his own illness as well. And I'd completely forgotten that. It was really interesting to watch some of the documentary in there today. I was like, God, this was really cutting edge at the time. It was extraordinary. And, a word that's overused sometimes, but he was incredibly brave and outspoken. And also all those juxtapositions that he always has of beauty, but things that are also quite rugged and harsh. Even Dungeness in itself, sitting next to a nuclear power station, do you know what I mean? Is the ultimate kind of paradox. But it just brought back so many fantastic memories of him, and hanging out with him. Is a lovely guy to hang out with.
I love this idea of him rocking up at the sits, but also within modern nature, which I've revisited a couple of times since I've been to the exhibition, and loved just reflecting a little bit more of Glasgow, and the way he made this his base. It had a profound effect on him. And Matthew, I love the bits where he's, as you say, he's either finding camp beds at Paddy's Market, or he speaks about going somewhere to get, like in the west of Glasgow, he walks there to get second-hand TVs, and everything is precious, everything is recycled. And whether that's his gardening or him, there are motifs that he revisits. That idea of archive, but also moving forward, is so much at the heart of what he's always done, really, isn't it?
And like picking up, like nothing's wasted.
Yes.
Nothing is, it's used, it's recycled, but also it's kind of like, it's precious and it's something to look at and kind of obsess over. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I'm actually quite curious about like where you were going to lunches at that point. If you were at Citizens, what was your lunch spot? So
our lunch spot. Oh, in those days, the Citizens had its own canteen.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you stayed within building.
So we kind of stayed in the canteen. It was more nightlife. We went to other places.
He speaks about Bennett's a lot in
Yes,
Modern Nature.
we went to Bennett's a lot, actually. I hung out at Bennett's with Derek quite a few times.
There's a play, I think, to be written actually about the places in which he dined and went out and stayed within Glasgow. I thought of this a lot in Modern Nature. Now I've got the Citizens' Canteen being part of that. I love that as well, Matthew, absolutely. We have the stories of Bennett's, but also his great reflections on the Central Hotel right beside Central Station that he stays in, you know, and he says, I hear Judy Garland stayed in there. I hope her room was a little bit flashier than mine. It's about these men with their pink bodies going down with towel around them because a lot of the rooms didn't have running water, you know. I just want, you know, Jarman at the Central Hotel. I'm here for that film, right?
So was Trigger the horse, of course.
That's right.
And Danny Kaye. So yeah, he was in good company. But I love that as well. What you talk about is that thing of the old traditional art as well of found objects. Mm-hmm. You know, and how he uses that all the time. And again, sort of looking at the exhibition and I'm using like high art, for want of a better word, like, and religious iconography and using crucifixes but putting them next to driftwood and then pulling it together using bitumen tar but just some of the things he picked up on the beach and stuff like that is brilliant, but turns them into his own iconography, you know. And a lot of his iconography is also about being present, I think, a lot of the time, as much as found objects, which I think his life became. It was very much about the moment and taking in the moment and kind of, just being very, very aware of your surroundings.
And who's there and who's not there.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely.
I think that's what's interesting in the, in the film we see of this installation at the Third Eye Centre. And again, within Modern Nature, the other thing that really struck me is, I mean, I don't really have a great idea about numbers of things, but he speaks about, 500 people were in today, 600 people were in today. I just love the fact that feels like a hugely busy environment that people were coming into, and by and large were welcoming. I think, in fact, one of his favourite sort of references of, look how many bookmarks I've got, how am I meant to find my place? It's so many lovely moments. But I think he speaks about, the most active it ever got were a couple of American girls who walked into whoever it was in the bed that day and were like, come on then boys, get on with it. There wasn't so much antagonism, and I think a woman comes in and is appalled because it's quote unquote pornography, and she's worried that it might have turned her into a lesbian. I was like, not necessarily sure that's what's got to her if you're that concerned.
No, it was incredible. I remember it was a real buzz that time, and again shows you how vital places like Third Eye Centre, now the CCA, are or were, because that year, I mean, there was such a wide range of people. I remember George Wiley was exhibiting that year as well, and then you'd performance art like Dogs and Honey were performing, and Derek and things. But it was chock-a-block. I've been questioning myself about this when I knew I was coming, that I don't know if my memory's been playing tricks on me. I'm sure Tilda did the Third Eye Centre. I'm sure she appeared in the bed. And
I've read reference to it. I can't say whether the source was utterly true,
because I was sure she was there, because I was like, oh my God, there was a kind of flurry that Tilda Swinton's in the bed in the gallery next door.
It certainly exists in the collective imagination, that happening, right? Whether it did
we can make it happen.
We have spirited her there one way or another. It's fascinating as well. I do remember some of those headlines. I was a kid, but of course it was horrifying because everything was very frightening, and you worry and you don't really understand things. But I'm absolutely told by my folks that it's utterly completely unacceptable the way in which people are being persecuted. It's horrifying. But I do remember it almost not from a completely, if you like, adult perspective. You remember it firsthand. But for you, I'm wondering as well, Matthew, looking back on this period, which is history, not by much, but there's something about actually physically seeing these newspapers, the way it's presented within the Hunterian, which is so striking and frightening, I find as well, because not really so different from what we see on a lot of the newspaper
fronts even now.
I guess that's the funny thing with history or something. If you've lived through something and then you come out the other side, I don't know, like amnesia is a thing you come across, and you forget certain points of time, or you cover over the traumatic bits, and you think, oh, actually, that's probably quite bleak. But then when I've only associated a lot of that stuff through archives or looking at it through TV or looking at it through a different lens or looking through paperwork. I was born in '89, so that was when that show was being constructed. Yeah. Sorry to drop my age in it, but then to
we'll forgive you.
I won't.
Thanks, Matthew. Gavin's leaving.
I was also going to talk about bravery and Derek being brave, and like the public wants to lynch anybody at any point. With headlines and like the journalism today is like, oh, they would lynch anybody of anything, and his bravery was just there, and like using tar to talk about that, and then using all these materials. And I was thinking about it, and like looking at, you do see headlines, and you do think about Section 28 all the time because it's a long legacy of just like, I might have been born in '89, but it's Absolutely. How I got through education. There was so much cutting off, and it's just there. And I was thinking about the Third Eye Centre, thinking about CCA in the works in itself. And even just now, you walk along Sauchiehall Street and the ABC's been ripped out. And there's nothing worse than looking at a building when it's been torn down and you see its guttings, you see everything. It's so raw and it's just there. And it's really like, it's poking you a bit, It's like you can't just look at it and just be like, oh yeah, that's been, there's been a fire, it's been demolished or whatever. It's just really ripping out the heart of a place. Yeah,
I think that's why there is such a visceral response. I can't tell you the number of people I've spoken to who can't even really think about the Mac building, who can't really think about Glasgow School of Art in many ways because of what it meant to them and what's not there, and the ABC is the same. But I think what's wonderful about the archive from the Third Eye Centre is that these moments that weren't necessarily from quote-unquote Scottish artists at all, this celebration of how important that installation was for us, of course, but also for Jarman, for his art, for what came afterwards. But also within your response, you also touch on another incredible artist who exhibited, but also whose archive within the Third Eye Centre is absolutely vital and unprecedented anywhere else, which is Julius Eastman. And tell us a bit about this story, because how unreal. And it was a mislabelled tape, is that right?
Yeah, so I've been told, how it's come about. And like I'd been, his name's, been circulating, it gets trendy every now and then, it disappears and it comes back. And like a lot of his stuff is quite hard to find because it just wasn't, again, archived properly, and he probably wasn't looking after quite a lot of his own material. And, just discovering that it's right here, there's so much always right where you are. Correct. And I think I was just mind blown because a lot of the research, brings you to the East Coast of America, and you're looking at stuff that's New York, you're looking at stuff that's Philadelphia or whatever. And then all of a sudden you've got this piece of material and it's right in Glasgow and it's right next to, and it's not, it's not a long distance away from Derek. Like there's a lot of stuff that's right here, and there's a lot of special things that have happened here that artists who are here, they do something daring or they test the waters with something, and it says a lot about a place when you have the capacity to do that or the freedom to do that. Yeah. I was thinking as well with the show that's on now at the Hunterian and the length of time that it's got on, which is quite a rare opportunity to have such a show that goes on for such a long time.
So true.
And most things are short-lived, and it turns, you get a month, you get 2 months, it's gone. But to be able to have a show that's on for 6 months and that slow process of like, you can go back, you can absorb it, you can, approach it in a different way.
Yeah, completely.
So these things, on top of each other, and I guess that's how I was thinking.
At what point were you approached about, creating a response to the exhibition? Can you talk us through that process a little bit, and how? I just love the fact that there is this third eye heart to it, and Julius is a part of it. There's a whole story there. How long does it take for starters?
Well, it's probably Dominic's brainchild. He's kind of like brought it all together. He saw some works that were going into the collection. Yeah. He knew some works that already existed, and he, I guess, wanted to kind of like merge the history and some kind of new commissions next to each other. So I heard about the plan maybe a year before the exhibition had opened, and he wanted to get me involved in it with a new commission, a new piece. I was talking about some of the stuff that I was working on, which was thinking about Julius's kind of legacy, the avant-garde classical kind of like world, as well as art stuff, and what I was doing my own work, which is a lot of self-portraits. And then I think it was probably maybe like 3 months before the opening of the show, before that work really came together.
Okay.
And then I was like, I knew I wanted to work with one of the buildings really nearby. And then it so happened that the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons has a building on St Vincent Street, and I got obsessed with it. And it happened because of Open Doors Day and a friend who also who has access to like a friend who works at Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. So we went in and just scouted and looked at the stuff, and it just kind of made sense. And like to stage something, to stage your own kind of like image, which I guess is like an exhibition within the image.
Yeah.
Bringing these people into it, and then just being a couple streets away, it felt real, and it felt like alive. Felt like Derek's very much still here, very much alive, and I was rereading quite a lot of the material again, and it was all very present.
Yeah.
Nothing had really gone.
It does feel alive. I would absolutely agree with that, and it does feel the fact that it is this conversation, it's a response, but it feels like that works both ways, Gavin, with all of the responses with the films and certainly with your work. And again, there are so many stories within it, this idea of digging in another time in all manner of ways, excavating other people, other memories, but especially those who've maybe been misrepresented or totally forgotten.
Yeah. Because I think that's the other lovely thing about To Third Eye as well, that it brought back so many people that we have and are still with us, but we kind of forget how creative a period it was. People like Neil Bartlett.
Oh, yeah, wonderful Neil.
Incredible what he did. The sits at that point in time as well, and also pulling all that together, things like Clause 28.
Yeah.
And suddenly how important that was and what a massive threat it was to people. And to kind of be around then and all those places and how integral they were to Glasgow as a city and voices. And people who visited, like Betty Bourne, and people being quite militant about it and feeling quite empowered and taking the stage and giving themselves a voice, which I think is beautiful when you see the exhibition as well. And you hear Derek talking quite eloquently. And I love that you don't really see his face.
This is fascinating, isn't it? It's
that.
So key, I think, to that particular film. And Neil is part of that as well.
You see Neil, which is lovely.
Yeah, and hear him. And again, in Modern Nature, I think this is kind of the beginning of it. Thursday the 1st of June, Neil Bartlett called with plans for an installation next October at the Third Eye in Glasgow. And then they go on to talk about various other things. But there you go. It's like planting that seed a bit like you're saying, about the beginning. But also it's one thing to create that work as a work of art. And you knew it would be in the context of the exhibition. But what's it like seeing it in conversation with the other responses and also with these particular works of Derek's?
Yeah. I mean, the pressure from the get-go, to have a show with, next to Derek's works is like amazing in itself. But the pressure to look at your own practice and be like, what are you up to? What are you making? What relevance does it have? And of course, there could have been a response that was something about Dungeness. There could have been any point of like Derek's spectrum of working that could have been a very clear route into making something. But it felt like also like the way in which he worked, which is really obvious, is like it's, he's an incredible thinker and an incredible maker, but there's a lot of other people that are part of how he makes. And like it's always collaborative, and he always brings people into his sets. And, if he's doing a shoot on the beach, there's people, there's props, there's all this extra thing. So it's, we can canonize people, but also there's other people that are around at the same time. So I think it was like really important to kind of like think about the echoes of people, and that's what my work was about. If I was going to be thinking about Julius anyway, was, it's trying to avoid the canon and try to talk about a community or like a queer community or something else that also exists. That's also having to fight against something. It's never the individual. So.
It also made me think back to, I loved your exhibition at the DCA a few years ago now, right? I was thinking it was last year. It wasn't.
Time.
Soon come. Time, I know. It's scary. But again, very much reflecting on different histories, but also that idea of archive as well, and the way in which, in one way, that can seem like a past thing, but in actual fact, the living archive. I was speaking about it as part of the Maud Salter exhibition, which is at Tramway just now, and speaking to some of the brilliant creatives involved with that. But that idea of, as you've just said, the number of ways in which it's a starting point is incredible. Across all different types of media as well. I mean, sound, image, photography, which again is very much at the heart of a lot of what you do. Yeah. It doesn't need to just be one thing.
Yeah, I think everybody has their own. Everybody's got archives. Everybody's got a connection to it and can talk about it, and it's finding the preciousness about it. And the DCA show was an opportunity to really kind of, within the, I guess, contemporary arts setting, was to kind of bring conversations together, and it felt funny. I mean, the show was about the West Midlands, and I felt really guilty about doing a whole show about the West Midlands in Dundee, of all places. But I think a lot of the conversations were probably similar. Industrial towns, probably deprived, left out. The budgets of, council budgets aren't looking after its buildings, and there's a lot of loss. So, and there's also a lot of people in there, and lots of people have stakes to a place. So it was all about that, really. And as much as I remember when I was making that show, it was I didn't really see how heavy it was while I was making it. I was just like, I was going. And then when we started installing it, I made these work in these vitrines, which looked like coffins. And I was like, oh man, it's bleak. It's horrible. And I was looking at Owen Dara at the time, the curator, and I was just like, I'm so sorry. I just made a traumatic show. And
about the West Midlands.
Yeah,
in
now
Dundee.
we're going to have to just talk about sadness. It's like, no, it's beautiful. It's like, thanks.
That coming out the other end of it.
Yeah.
There's a notion of negatives, and the sort of very much looking at, which is in the exhibition, and also I think you spoke about a little bit around that time as well. There's something that if you were of a certain age, you'd have boxes of negatives, right? Yeah. You'd have boxes of tiny photographs that are, where's the light and where's the dark and what are they? And you've got to very, very actively and physically kind of bring them back to life, if you like. And there's something really fascinating about that. And with someone like Jarman, there's a lot that we are quite familiar with now, but there are all sorts of ways of seeing them. And again, for yourself going through your archive, there's that element as well. Analogue still works fine sometimes, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I believe in it. I'm not biased. I still use digital, but I'm a fiend for analogue stuff, and it's just a quality. It's a quality thing.
Yeah. And the poring over images, I think, as well.
Yeah. Slower.
Yeah.
So,
actively looking into them. This notion of Derek Jarman coming to the sits and getting these camp beds, and the fact that was just the day-to-day at the time, Gavin, must have been wonderful, because it's not perhaps till something like this that you look back and go, God almighty, And that's another thing that's really important and brilliant about having an exhibition like this in Glasgow. For you too, right? Everyone's bringing their own memories. The reason the West Midlands and Dundee struck such a chord, and I'm half Dundonian, so I can speak personally about this, I like to think. My dad lives there, is because in that awfully selfish way, it's about ourselves as well, right? It's about you, but also we're applying whatever memories and framework. We can't help that. And so for you, it's like, my goodness, right? You're seeing Jarman from a different aspect.
Yeah. Well, it makes you very personally reflect on your own time at that period of time and things, and being at the sits, and then also seeing clips of the exhibition and thinking, my God, I remember it like it was yesterday, but suddenly you're watching a film that's like, my God, that looks quite old. That's history.
That's so true.
And also, as you say, pouring over images when you watch some of the films as well. That I think it makes you very present to slow down and just watch and be part of something. And what is it you are watching? You kind of become at one with what you're observing. In a way, which I think is really, really important. Kind of gentle lesson to stop and take something in like that. And I think he was very, very good at doing that. I suppose Blue being the kind of ultimate sort of experience of that.
It's like that brilliant, the dual power of, being very activist and very militant in one hand, but also having this, I think it's sometimes referred to obviously as a sort of mournful or a haunting quality as well. And Blue for that is incredible, isn't it? I mean, just...
And his own kind of, as we talk about archive, he was kind of his own archivist, really. It's sort of extraordinary how he documented his own life and friends round about him, as you said, people who he also lost. He was way ahead of his time that way, I think. But I also love that, again, talking about the paradoxes of him, that kind of weird parallel again of juxtapositions that he uses, old and new. You know, you think amazing to like do something like Jubilee, but do something like Caravaggio. Do something like use religious objects, but then, you know, use a condom or whatever. You know what I mean? It's sort of like he clashed things together, but he would refer to history, historical figures, you know, but at the same time bring it right up to now and make it his own, you know, was fantastic.
That's so absolutely true, because Caravaggio is a great case in point, again, a child of the 80s, trying to find out more about this guy, and then suddenly there's this film that stars Dexter Fletcher, who I knew and loved in ITV hit show Press Gang, you know, and he was in The Delinquents with Kylie Minogue.
And then directed Sunshine on Leith.
It's just this wonderful, you know, it's like this snaking paths everywhere. And you're so right as well about the sort of collaborative aspect of it. Much later, when I was in my 20s and I was living in London, I worked for a record label, Mute, and Simon Fisher-Turner was one of our artists, and of course he was like an absolutely lovely man just rocking about, and I was completely in awe, you know, because again of this, and I love reading about him within the book. Everyone plays this really, really integral part, you know, and I think perhaps because of the diary elements to his book, I love Chroma as well. I brought that just because I was reading it again on the train. His interpretations of colour are just joyous as well. But yeah, you want to know everything about everyone who's a part of it.
Yeah,
And, you know,
totally.
I think that's a lovely. He introduces everyone who's around him.
Well, it's again, as Matthew said, I think it's almost like it's like an old Renaissance artist or something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He's like a Giotto or something. He has like a
Yeah.
whole school of people around him that are responsible for the work as well as him, but he does kind of defer to them a lot
And
of
he
the time.
trusts them.
Yeah.
There's a lot
That's
of
a
trust.
really good point. Yeah.
You know, it's like, gonna give it to that person to do that bit, and like, and that's real collaboration. That's not like I'm just giving you a task and I pay you, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
There's like a releasing of creative. Like he's got the vision, but he trusts somebody else to also carry that vision through, because it's kind of instilled in them that it's almost like an ethos or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to make it sound bigger than it is, but maybe it is. But it's quite telling when you do read the diaries how much trust there is. It's like, oh, and I suppose that came down to health, and like maybe you couldn't carry it through all the way, you know. So you had to kind of begin letting go of stuff. So it's quite hard to know where it is.
Yeah, and documenting everything. And the idea of modern nature as well, as a title, as an ethos, like you're saying, but also within the exhibition, for him, that idea of nature is absolutely reflective of the detail and the beauty in a petal, you know, in a garden, but also nature is also sex and death. It's corporeal as well.
Yeah.
Like it's this. I love Olivia Laing, I think, touches on that in her introduction to that edition of modern nature. What is nature? It's not just the garden is incredible, but it's not just that very kind of flat and literal interpretation of the garden. And again, you know, for your jumping off point, if you like, Matthew, then it's everything, right?
Yeah, it's the he for him. It's everything. And that's it. You can't split one version of yourself away, or you can't separate things. And I guess, and the things of the garden, though, his knowledge of the garden is also amazing. Like just to reference, you know, go for a walk and count how many flowers and plants and herbs you can see, and that kind of knowledge. I'm in awe of that, and I'm kind of studying up on my little floral books to see if I can get some knowledge. While I go down to your allotment of like, no, that's just a weed. No, that again is, you know, some weeds are good weeds.
I shouldn't be in defence of weeds.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're paying, because you pay such, you know, details are a real key aspect of so much of what you do as well. Imagine then it's like, where do you where does that begin and where does it end?
Yeah, or where does it just feel like nonsense? Who's appreciating it? Or like, is it just for me? Or I don't know. Yeah, I love the details. The small things go into, especially with filming or if I'm recording sound, it's just like, what is in the atmosphere? What is there? You know?
Were all of those aspects as important to you? Because obviously photography, we've talked about the photography and the sound and the image, and how important was someone like Jarman he doesn't really have those boundaries, right? In a way, as we were saying, his films are like paintings. His diaries are visual or as filmic as you like, you know. And his garden was probably his ultimate work of art, you could argue. There's not necessarily that distinction or need to be pigeonholed.
It's just kind of amazing, and to think about. I guess if you, as a visual art, I call myself a visual artist, but I definitely do make sound stuff. But then you look at Derek, I think it's just being quite free. It's just a free creative spirit that really understands that you take everything from anything. Like you take inspiration from your surroundings and your bearings, and you apply it to what you do, and you start to really think about feelings, thinking about how you get moved by certain stuff. And then apply that to an art practice, and I guess that's what he was doing and testing the waters with stuff. But reading the books as well, you can see how some of the ideas come from an early age, and it's like as time goes on, maybe there's some budget. Let's apply those ideas later on, and you see it come into life in the films. You see how some of the stuff comes in, or like the casting, or the young boy, and then you got the clothes, and from clothing to the backdrops, everything's thought about. It's actually incredible.
And everything's connected to some extent as well. And presumably that's the same for your work, in that nothing exists in a vacuum. So you've had this response to this particular exhibition. I don't know what you're working on just now. I know I'm allowed to say that there is an exhibition coming up in Edinburgh.
Yeah, there is. I like to think they're all connected, but I don't know if they're,
Maybe you don't know in real
it's
time.
It's chaos. Yeah, real time, that's true. That's a good point. Like, you don't really know what's happening when you're in it, but when you look back, maybe you see, oh yeah, that's connected. That you're making that, or that thing you done commercially, or you got commissioned to do for somebody else. Actually, is very close to the thing you're doing for yourself.
Yeah, there's another lovely, I think, interpretation of the word digging, and I think maybe we should touch on it, which is, yes, politically, in terms of activism, he was so utterly vital. You used the word brave, and the creativity is incredible, but also joyous, like digging. Let's talk about, the kind of like the jazz interpretation of it. He's just digging it, right? He was just digging life. There's absolute exuberance. The diary, again, speaks of the wonderful nights out he had at Bennett's. He's that idea of loving life.
Oh, he loved life, yeah. I mean, I never ever heard him complain or moan or, and when you went out with him, he was great fun. It was great fun to be around, and absolutely joyous. And even I think that comes over in the exhibition when you see him again talking at the Third Eye. He comes over as delightful, I think. He's great fun. Yeah. And is very, very light. He had a great waspish sense of humour things. And again, I think it's that thing of, he was this kind of Renaissance man. It was like he made his mark in any kind of way possible. And, from found things that he saw the beauty in, to expressing himself in darker, more visceral ways with the paintings that it's almost like some of those bigger pieces that's almost like claw marks.
Completely.
And you can almost feel the kind of anguish and sort of pain and expression in them. It's quite extraordinary. And then other moments of utter, tender, ephemeral beauty that he could conjure. And as you say, when he writes, it's almost like his idea of colours. The way he captures things, he almost mixes senses up. He almost creates a new sense for you, because he just collaborates in so many different ways. There is no rules. He's a real rule breaker in every possible sense. And also, like any good, I don't know if would have liked to have been called a teacher, but he is a teacher in so many ways, because like any good artist, as a huge Bowie fan, he'll make you refer back. He will make you follow other leads.
Yes.
So if you're into Jarman, you think, oh, well, I've never read that, or I've never looked at their work, or that puts you in mind of. So he's very inspirational as well, and his inspirations tend to be very joyous as well. But again, it's exceptional that people would go, Jubilee or Pet Shop Boys or all these kind of things. But you think, yeah, but he'll take you to Renaissance as well. He will cover,
that's
centuries.
So
this man,
and also now,
or we'll take you to a bare beach.
Or he'll take you to Julius Eastman. He'll take
absolutely.
you. That's what I love. The possibilities.
Yes.
And I think maybe that idea of possibility of a garden, of a film, of a space, of Glasgow, of a camp bed. they're endless.
Yeah.
It's that hope. Now, we've both, which is lovely, brought some books and you've lifted
It's
one
just
up.
that,
What's this
that
you've
picture
got?
you mentioned, joy and like fun and like and loving life and living life.
How would you describe that? You're the visual artist. She says.
I mean, which one? The one on the right. I mean, everybody's there and enjoying it, but like also at the same time probably being like, are we allowed? Yeah, we're allowed. Let's go for it. Let's go. Like no rules.
There's nuns. There is a picture of absolute ecstasy. Will we say that?
Yeah.
I mean,
and he looks so serene in the middle of it all.
I know. At your own risk,
It's
a
Adrian
saint's
McDowell's
testament.
So it's all allowed, and it's all kind of in that picture, really. You know,
it is all allowed.
Yeah.
I think probably that might be, that might be the heart of so much of it as well. Utterly, utterly wonderful. Well, thank you both for hanging out and giving me an excuse to go back to the exhibition again. Even having chatted about it now, I want to go back again. And obviously so many other incredible responses within there. Sarah Wood, Luke Fowler and more. What's it been like seeing their responses just finally, Matthew, alongside your own?
And like Luke's film is like you start to see so much about Dungeness and then within the house and
being
all
blue.
this sound, all this texture. Tom's film again, amazing, like removing Derek from sight and like you're in the space, you're in the exhibition, you're seeing all these faces, all these younger eyes looking out in awe and like everybody there and like the attention that he's just commanding. And then you see his paintings. I mean, you were talking about his paintings just then. I was like, some of them are so thick, so dense, you know? And like sometimes you just see them in books. You see replications, reproduced in the book, the photograph in the book, and you go up to them, you see them, you're like, you have to actually just like take it in because it's amazing. It's incredible pieces of work. So it's it's an honour to be a part of a show like that one. So it's really, really, really good.
But you're so right. The physicality of it is really quite forceful when you're in that space, right? Yeah. And I think maybe that's why we're lucky that we still have a good few months that we can go and go again. Yeah. It's probably too late today, or I'd probably go right back. But I think we might have gone over by 4 minutes, and we're going to get chucked out of Kelvin Hall. Barred from
the
Kelvin
door.
Hall.
Now, Jarman fashion, let's have a protest.
Exactly. We shall not be moved.
I do not want to sleep in this boardroom. If this is a sit-in.
Okay, I'll be a one-woman sit-in. That's all right. Here for you, Derek. Jarman.
I like the table.
I know, it's quite nice actually. Listen, thank you both so much. It's been really lovely to chat, and I love we all brought our books. Lovely as that. We can do a book swap, and hopefully we can chat around about your exhibition as well. But no pressure. You've got a few months of a deadline before that.
I think it's now, so at Stills, it's going to be in early September, which was meant to be last year. We postponed it. And that should run through till maybe November. So that'll be quite fun.
Amazing. Okay. Well, you can keep all the ideas for that as a secret for now. But hopefully, Gavin, we can go across. If we ever leave this room, which we might not, we might leave it by September just for you, Matthew. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Artist Matthew Arthur Williams and actor Gavin Mitchell there. And yes, we did finally escape the building. Digging in another time, Derek Jarman's Modern Nature is at Glasgow's Hunterian Art Gallery until the 4th of May. And check out the GFT website for details of that fab-looking film programme running in the coming weeks, including screenings of Caravaggio and of Blue. Matthew has an exhibition opening at Still Centre of Photography in Edinburgh later this year. I'll keep you posted on that. Look out for Gavin touring in a town near you with his excellent show Look Who It Isn't, a Bobby Unwrapped. And he also stars alongside Jack Loudon in new Radio 4 play The Pretender Prince. You can hear that in May. You can also hear Gavin's dulcet tones on an earlier episode of A Kick Up the Arts, where we went to Scottish Opera's Don Pasquale and we interviewed the legendary Bridget the Chihuahua. And that Maud Salter exhibition that I mentioned is still running at Glasgow Tramway. It is fantastic, and you can hear me chatting to some of the creatives involved with its live programme on an earlier episode of the podcast. Alright, that is quite enough for now. Don't forget to join us at the Portobello Bookshop on March the 27th for a night of music and chat with David Keenan. You'll find tickets online. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.